Coming up next.
You are a disgrace.
Does Kamala Harris have what it takes to lead the free world?
We want to know the dirt.
Meet the people who know her best.
Was she a great love?
Very much so.
Hello and welcome to the 60 Minutes podcast, Extra Minutes. I'm Amelia Adams and I'm very delighted to have in studio today with me our wonderful producer, Nichola Younger. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
First
Thank you for
time.
having me. I know.
Now, Nichola, you were our US Bureau producer for 9 News for 4 years.
That's correct.
While
yeah,
I
4
was
years.
correspondent there. So just for a bit of background, we did a lot of US politics together. We did the 2020 election.
Yes.
We did Joe Biden's inauguration. So Nichola and I really share a love of and passion for US politics. So following developments very closely in the States, when Joe Biden stepped aside dramatically, we sat down and said, who is Kamala Harris? Australians really don't have a sense of her. And to do that, we knew we had to really go back to where she grew up to begin to tell her story. And you were able to track down some amazing talent for this story. If you haven't watched it, do so on the YouTube channel. Beginning with one of her oldest childhood friends, Carol. How did you find her?
Yeah, so like you said, I don't feel like as Vice President, not many people knew, or still don't really know Kamala Harris. So we decided that this would be a good way to, tell her story and who she is. And I guess being Vice President, you do spend a lot of, time behind the scenes, as a supporter of the president. So we found Carol Porter. I found her just doing a bit of a deep dive on the internet and finding out who, knew Kamala Harris and who's known her for a long time. And I came across her and called her in, the early hours of Australia, and I had a good chat to her on the phone. And she's a very, very lovely woman. She's actually known Kamala since childhood.
Yeah, they
days.
were like year one bus buddies.
Yeah, so she lived on in the same suburb down the road from Kamala, where Kamala lived with her mother and her daughter, her sister. And they were... Kamala and Carol were known as the other little girls on the bus. So basically they lived in this, multicultural suburb of Berkeley, and they would be bused together. Carol speaks very fondly of Kamala, and to this day they're still very, very good friends.
Yeah, she does. And I think what struck me when you and I got to Berkeley was just what a sort of a normal, it's quite middle class now, but it was, we know, quite a working class, predominantly black, multicultural neighbourhood back in the late 60s and early 70s when Kamala and Carol were growing up and going to school.
Yeah, it sure was. And we talk about it in our episode. Basically, this suburb was instrumental in driving social change, and there was lots of protests in their, formative years growing up.
Vietnam War protests just down the street, she said.
Yeah, and so Kamala Harris was very involved in that, and she said, Carol Porter, from a very young age, she knew that Kamala had, quite confidence. She was a great listener, and she really feels that her upbringing was something that made her into where she is now.
Yeah, really critical. What I loved about meeting Carol was that, as you mentioned, they're still really good friends. So these two girls that have caught the bus together to year one and gone through school together, she'd seen her, I think, the week before we met her, and we went to Kamala Harris's house where she grew up and the neighbourhood, and walking along she was telling us how they'd just caught up and how sort of confident and positive Kamala was.
Yeah, she did say that. Another person we spoke with while we were in that, neighbouring neighbourhood was our friend Derek.
Yes, we love Derek.
Derek was a hoot, and he owns the local House of Waffles, somewhere where Kamala still goes to this day. Yeah, and they met again at a young age as teenagers.
Yeah, so Oakland, not far from Berkeley, just across the bay, I guess, from San Francisco, where we were staying, and that was so much fun going to the home of chicken and waffles. It was kind of exactly what I'd pictured, actually. Derek's restaurant. The fried chicken was delicious. Yes, we can confirm. Yep. We had a massive crew meal there. But he, I thought, gave me at least a sense of, I guess, a young carefree Kamala. He talked about, they used to go clubbing, they used to go to concerts. So again, from Carol to Derek, getting this sense of the fact that she had a very normal kind of working middle class American upbringing, and the polar opposite when you look at her rival, Donald Trump. You know, she doesn't come from money. She doesn't come from family wealth or self-made wealth. She really, went to very normal schools and then went on to law school. And that's really where her career blossomed into a prosecutor.
Yeah, and that brings in our another talent that we spoke to, Mayor Willie Brown.
Oh, Willie. We love Willie.
So he was the mayor of San Francisco for 8 years.
Such a character.
Such a character. And still to this day is, quite a, big kingmaker, I guess, he's the Democrat.
A huge name really for California Democrats, for people who don't know Willie Brown. He is a political, or was a political mentor to a lot of people. Gavin Newsom, the current governor of California, Kamala Harris. He's 90 years old now, and we were amazed, he is so switched on.
Very switched on. And I actually asked him what his potion
You did.
was that allows him to still be so vibrant and chirpy at 90 years of age. And he actually, part of when we were over there, we went into where he goes every day and has the same meal at lunchtime.
Sam's Tavern, downtown San Francisco.
And he sits there with a glass, kind of looks like a mini jug.
Tumbler.
Of vodka, which is pretty much filled with vodka and tipped up.
Amazing.
Just with a little bit of orange juice.
Yeah, that's great life advice for everyone, I think.
Yeah, but he was, for 90 years young.
Yeah, he really was.
He was fantastic.
What was really insightful about talking to Willie Brown as well was that not only was he Kamala's political mentor for a time, so she's gone through law school, she's making a name for herself in the 90s as a pretty tough and sharp-tongued prosecutor. And she began dating Willie Brown, which at the time was quite controversial. There was a 30-year age gap. They dated only for a short time, but again, he speaks so highly of her and says they keep in touch. And he was quite instrumental in introducing her to various people and boards at that time in her career when it was just taking off. And not long after they dated, she became the DA, the first ever female black district attorney of San Francisco.
Yeah, it was interesting, as you said, when we did speak to him about, Kamala, and we sat down, his eyes just lit up, his face lit up every time we, mentioned her name. I think he, you even asked the question, was she a fond love? And then he couldn't speak highly.
Well, I had been warned that he didn't speak about their relationship, especially now that she's presidential candidate. So people said to me, he won't talk about the fact that they dated. But it was he's such a warm, engaging character. As the interview went on and on, I thought, I've got to put it to him. And when I said, do you remember dating her? It was a fond time, a fond relationship. I was surprised by how open he was. He said, she was much more than a date. She was, a great love. And as you said, his face kind of lit up. He was a fascinating character, Willie Brown, very, very open, and really critical to her time in California, which is where, as we said, she made herself before going on to DC in 2017. So that's when Kamala Harris went to the US Senate and began her, national career.
Yeah. And not many people know she actually ran for the 2019 or 2020 election and didn't have a very good campaign.
No, I think you're right. I think Australians forget that. She launched a presidential run and she pulled out very early. She had terrible polling numbers and lots of sort of allegations of mismanagement and a chaotic campaign. But of course, none of that mattered because a few months later, Joe Biden tapped her to be his running mate and there she made history again, as we know. So looking at it now, she has become the presidential candidate in quite remarkable, in fact, unprecedented circumstances. She stepped into that role with a relatively short time until polling day. People are sort of going, who is she? Who is the real Kamala Harris? Because she does seem to have, or at least there's a perception of, and I've found, she struggles to connect. And certainly political commentators we've spoken to emphasise that as well. She has struggled to connect, speak in real language. She gets her tongue tied a little bit of a word salad.
Yes.
Those kind of everyday, especially the working class American voters that she needs to win in order to win this election.
Yeah.
That there's been a gap there, and that's her big challenge, I think.
Yeah, and I still think it is, I think a good standout point for Kamala at the moment was the debate. And I think in that debate she was very moderate.
Yep.
And I think that really has set her in good stead. Right now, as you said, polls are neck and neck.
Yeah. You couldn't call it. I mean, yeah, you couldn't call it today. It's just so tight.
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. We've got 37 days now to the election.
And things can change so quickly.
They
I mean,
can.
we've seen 2 assassination attempts in the last
Yeah.
couple of months.
Yeah.
One debate which changed the entire course of the campaign. A second debate which, as you say, I think did give Kamala a bit of a boost.
Yeah, I think the thing is, though, for her right now is she needs to keep, the direction that she's kind of on.
Stay the course.
Stay the course. I think a lot of people still don't think that her policies are clear. I think also a lot of people feel that she's not really doing, one-on-one interviews, and she's kind of,
Well, that's true. I mean, she's only recently done her first sit down.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a campaign, plan or...
Problem for her
I'm
is
not sure.
it leaves it open to speculation for people to say, oh, well, her team doesn't think she can manage it.
Yes.
Or she'll get her words tied up. Or
Totally.
she'll say the wrong thing.
Yeah. And I think going into the debate, she, you can tell that she had been very well rehearsed, and she had, she had been having a lot of, practice with, mock debates and stuff like that. And I think
we did know that. And she really pushed his buttons and got exactly what she needed out of him, which was for him to react in an outrageous way, say outrageous things, and basically completely unraveled.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't really know. I don't know what's in store.
Yeah.
37 days is not that long to go. And I think if she says, like we said, if she sticks to her kind of course, it'll be interesting to see what comes.
She's got a couple of problems. I think the California Liberal thing is a problem for a lot of Americans.
Yeah.
California, San Fran, deeply democratic, deeply liberal, often seen as very woke in terms of policy and ideology,
Yes.
and that works against her in Middle America.
Very much so.
So you've seen already, I think, in her language, she's trying to shift, and in her policies, which has kind of shifted.
Yeah, I agree. I think that very much came out in the debate. I think she was
Yeah.
very moderate in the way she spoke, and she kind of wants to distance herself from that very,
She has to.
Yeah.
She has to.
Yeah.
So I think that's a problem for her. I think continuing to communicate and convince working class Americans that their life would be better off under her, because ultimately she is the last 4 years.
Yes.
She hasn't been president, but she is the Biden-Harris administration. We spoke to a fantastic political commentator, actually pollster, Frank Luntz.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget him saying, the majority of Americans do not believe that their life will be better. Or actually, I should phrase it. He said, if you ask the majority of Americans, was your life better off? Were you
you're
better off
now? Yeah.
4 years ago? They think they were.
Yes.
Now, whether that's perception, whether that's, coming out of COVID, inflation, whatever it is, if you're an American voter and you think, you know what, I don't like Donald Trump, he puts his foot in it, he says outrageous things, he's not polite or pleasant about women, but
Yeah.
my
At the end of
life
the
is
day,
better, I
yeah.
can feed my family, you'll vote for him. And we met a lot of people like that on this trip.
Yeah, when we were over there as well in the States, we did another story on Trump's attempted assassination at the Butler rally.
Yeah,
And
the
when
first attempt on his life.
Yes, and when we were driving through, Butler and even, parts of Pennsylvania, it goes to show there is so much support out there for Trump. Most of, the houses all had, flags, the Trump train.
It was so striking to us too, because we'd come from DC, which seems completely democratic. And remember at the White House, and you had all these beautiful black women dancing in front, and
It was very-
black women for Kamala, and all of this. And then we I think within 2 or 3 hours of our drive, it was like a different country.
Yeah,
it
huge
was
shift.
Trump. There was still actually some Trump Pence flags up.
Yes,
But
yes.
that's really getting into rural America and people that will say to you, life is better under Trump.
Yeah.
So I think her challenge going forward is convincing those people that she can do better than they perceive the Biden-Harris administration has done for them. And And as you say, staying her course and keeping the high ground, because Donald Trump in the last few weeks, I think since that debate, he has said some really horrible things.
Yeah,
and it's not personal attacks. It's not okay to call someone mentally deranged.
Yeah.
Whether they're a woman or anyone. Like, those things do not sit well with normal voters, I don't think.
No, I don't think so either.
So I think if she can let him do his thing and be very clear about what her administration, not the Biden administration, but what a Harris administration would bring,
Yeah.
then she's got a good chance. But as we said, those polls, my goodness, I keep coming back to this every time we talk about it, every time we analyse Kamala Harris, like, who is she, what Donald Trump's doing, is how different they are. I mean, you could not have two more polarising, more opposite people
Yeah.
almost anywhere in the world, and those are the two options that Americans have.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Australians ask that as well.
Yes.
Out of how many people are in America, these are our two options. And like you said, we were in the States during the last election campaign in 2020. And I feel, having just been over there, it's so polarising. Way more than what it was in 2020.
Yeah,
and
it's
people
intensified.
all want to talk about is the election, and families are even being divided by it.
A lot of people feel that Kamala Harris, she skipped a step. She didn't have to go through a primary.
Yeah.
She was almost handed that nomination on a plate because the party rallied behind her. She got the numbers, she got the money. So I spoke to quite a few people who felt like, well, she's suddenly the candidate. We didn't get a say in it.
Yeah.
So there's a sense of that as well. But as you say, there's not long to go. It's going to be a very exciting election. I'm sure plenty will change.
Yeah, who
in the
knows?
next couple of weeks. We'll be across it. But it was a fascinating trip.
Sure was.
And if you haven't seen the story on YouTube, do watch it back and catch up on, of course, all our podcasts here as well.